Good afternoon, everyone. It's Pablo Zuanic, cannabis analyst at Zuanic Associates. I have the pleasure of welcoming former Congressman Ed Perlmutter. Welcome, Congressman.
Pablo, thanks for having me on the show.
No, our pleasure, of course. So look, we have a lot to cover, and we want to discuss the political landscape. We want to discuss, the genesis of SAFE and where we are with SAFE, and obviously, if it has any probability of passing this year with everything else going on. But I just want to tell an anecdote here before we start. For the audience out there, whether you're listening in Zoom or via Twitter, and you ask about institutional investor interest, I would say that it's always been there, the interest, and people, looking at the sector from far away, doing their homework, asking questions, coming in and out in terms of investment. But most of them, of course, are outside. But the anecdote I want to share here is that back in March 2022, I had the good fortune of being in touch with Congressman Perlmutter and his team. And they said to me, look, Congressman Perlmutter is going to be in New York on a Saturday morning. He can meet with your clients at 8 a.m. on a Saturday. And that was a first for me, right? Analyst for many, many years, hosting events. You never host an event on a Saturday in Wall Street and at 8 a.m., right? So we said, well, if that's the time he has, we'll take it, right? And we set up the event. I had a call from the head of equities at the place I was working at, pretty much telling me, like, am I crazy? What am I doing? Spending money on an event at Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Nobody's going to show up. And then we put out the invite, and what happened? Hedge fund owners, managers, fund managers were calling very senior people at the bank, trying to get a seat at the table. And that Saturday at 8 a.m., we had like 21 people sitting around the table. I mean, so Congressman, in what I call Wall Street lingo or parlance, you are a big draw, of course. Right? And
Okay.
SAFE has been a big topic in the industry all along. But I tell that anecdote because we had to, we couldn't take in everybody, and we're talking about institutional investors. So the interest is there. It just depends where we are in the cycle, right? So anyway, so thank you again, Congressman. And to start here, maybe just please remind people how long you were in Congress. Tell us what you're doing now after leaving Congress, and also what your role at present in the National Cannabis Roundtable. And thanks again for being here.
Sure, Pablo. So I was a congressman from Colorado, the suburbs of Denver, up into the mountains a little bit, for 16 years. So I won 8 terms in Congress representing the suburbs. I served on a whole variety of committees. Financial services was my main committee, and that's been my background as a lawyer, is financial services. And in the last couple of years, so I retired last year, was my last year. I was chairman of the Consumer Protection Financial Institutions subcommittee, which was the banking subcommittee. I also served on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee and a couple other rules committee, which is good for lawyers, because that's where all the bills of any size or controversy have to go through the rules committee. So I served 16 years in Congress and retired last year. I'm now a partner at the law firm of Holland & Knight, and I'm a partner in the Denver office and the DC office, and I still go back and forth like I did as a member of Congress. I try to follow the House calendar, so I'm here when the House is in session. And I've been working on a whole variety of things. One of them certainly has been cannabis and safe banking or safer banking. And I am an advisor and a lobbyist for the National Cannabis Roundtable. I've been working with them since the beginning of the year.
All right, thank you for that. So look, let's just talk about SAFE, and we want to do a bit of history here. And I know many of you on the line have asked, why are we talking about SAFE? Is it relevant? Is it ever going to pass this year with everything else going on? And that's what we'll try to address here. But let's do a bit of history here. When was the first time you filed SAFE? What was the rationale back then? And how did the bill evolve over time while you were the main sponsor of the bill, and attitudes towards it?
So Colorado was the first state to legalize marijuana, cannabis, anything with THC in it. So this was by a initiative of the people in 2012. And when that happened, Barney Frank, who was the head of the Financial Services Committee, said to me, okay, your state has legalized this. And then Washington was quickly followed thereafter. He said to me and to Denny Heck of Washington, you guys have got to figure out how to get the banking system squared away, because Barney could see there was going to be a collision between federal law and state law as it evolved in the banking system, and he was right. So he put us in charge. And the first thing we did is we went to the Obama administration and asked them to deschedule it or reschedule it. And the administration was not prepared to do that, but they assigned a guy named James Cole in the Justice Department to come up with some kind of a template as to how marijuana could be monitored, but don't go as far as descheduling or rescheduling. So Cole came up with what was called the Cole memo, and that set forth a number of things. There couldn't be any organized crime. You had to keep it out of the hands, marijuana out of the hands of kids. Had to be transparent, so you had some idea of what was happening. So came up with this template that we knew wouldn't be enough, because just a memo from the Justice Department, or what then became the FinCEN guidance in the Treasury Department, could be taken away at any time. So Denny and I then put together Safe Banking, the first iteration of Safe Banking, probably at the end of 2013, beginning of 2014, and then it's developed ever since. And one of the things we did see is when the Trump administration came in, Attorney General Sessions did revoke the Cole memo. Secretary Mnuchin kept the FinCEN guidance in place. So there really is a need for a statute in this area, so that from administration to administration, we don't see, vast swings in the law. And so that's what prompted us to do it, was we'd asked for descheduling. We got the Cole memo and the FinCEN guidance, but we've felt, and I still feel, we need a statute in place.
Right. And just to stay on that point, but maybe to ask you a related question. So if Secretary Mnuchin at the time left the FinCEN guidance in place, in your opinion, wouldn't have been enough for NASDAQ and NYSE to list U.S. plant-touching stocks, even though we didn't have the Cole memo, because we had the FinCEN guidance in place? I know we're getting off topic here, but given that you brought it up.
It's it's a very good question. So you want me to be a legislator, or you want me to be a lawyer in answering the question?
Be yourself.
So now I'm a lawyer again. So I'd say it's not enough. I mean, it's helpful and it gives you good guidance, but it can be taken away at a moment's notice. And that's the reservation I would have as a legislator. Now, I mean, as a lawyer, as a legislator, I would say, look, we've had something in place now since 2013, through the Obama administration, through the Trump administration, now through the Biden administration. So based on history, it's looking pretty solid, but we also know it can be taken away pretty easily.
Right. Understood. And look, can we just talk about how the attitudes, in your opinion, from both sides evolved over time, right? And we're going back from 2013 all the way to now 2024. But I'm asking, we have back in the day, Senator Booker telling pretty much that he would lay himself down to let SAFE go through, and then the tone changed around that he became more supportive. On the right, I guess some were supportive and then less supportive due to Section 10. I mean, just talk about how attitudes change over time, in your opinion. And I know it's hard to generalize, but yeah.
No, it's a good question. And you've heard this story, so I'm sorry that I'm repeating it for you. But when I first took this on back in 2013, 2014, I brought the proposed bill, the statute, in front of the Financial Services Committee. And we had a chairman, a guy named Jeb Henserling, friend of mine from Texas, but he was adamantly opposed. And at no time was he going to let this bill see the light of day. And in the committee, I would bring it up, and he would rule it out of order. And when I would bring it up, I had to deal with what I called the chuckle factor. So I would bring it up, and Congress had not addressed anything with THC in it since Richard Nixon made it illegal back in 1970 and 71 under the Controlled Substance Act. So Congress had never addressed this. And when I would bring it up, people would kind of go, oh, there's Perlmutter again. He's from Colorado. He's a mile high. And they'd kind of laugh it off. But I was pretty persistent. And the other members, particularly of financial services, saw the business that was developing in the cannabis industry and how big it was and how many people were involved and how much money and taxes were at stake. And they stopped laughing. So I overcame the chuckle factor. So finally in 2019, Democrats won the House of Representatives. And at that time, I'd been, really knocking on everybody's door, all the Democrats, all the Republicans, trying to get as much support for this legislation as I could. And our chairwoman at that time became Maxine Waters from Southern California, from LA. And she said, okay, Perlmutter, you've been talking to us, for 5 years now on this thing. Either put up or shut up. Let's see if you've got the vote. So we had a hearing, we had testimony, we then had a markup. So we did this in the ordinary course of business, what they call the regular order in Congress. And lo and behold, I got in that committee, which had never had a hearing or had a markup on cannabis. We finally did with SAFE, and what happened was every Democrat voted for it, and half the Republicans on that committee voted in favor. So we got it out with a big majority. Ultimately, the same thing happened when we brought it to the floor. Pelosi and Steny Hoyer, the speaker and the majority leader, said, okay, Ed, you've been talking a big game. Let's see if you can get it out of here. Well, we ended up getting more than 2/3 of the House to vote for it, virtually all the Democrats, right, and about half the Republicans. So we had a good history. Then it would run into the Senate. And in the Senate, whether it was Republicans, which it was in 19 and 20, and Democrats in 21 and 22, it was, for the Republicans, SAFE was too big and too broad, and they weren't going to have anything to do with it. For the Democrats in 21 and 22, it was too small and too narrow.
Right.
And so it just ended up, even though we passed it like 7 or 8 times to the Senate, it sat there. Now it's changing, where it passed the Senate Banking Committee, which is a first for the Senate, and it's a version called SAFER. It's basically SAFE, but with some modifications to Section 10 that deal with cartels and what was called Operation Choke Point. But it passed the Banking Committee in regular order, and it's ready to be taken up by the majority leader or added to some other particular piece of legislation.
Right. But on that point, I mean, if we step back to, when Democrats had control of the Senate, right, there was an opportunity to pass SAFE at that point. And your thesis, it wasn't so much that Senator Schumer was concerned that he wouldn't have the 60 votes, is that at the time, maybe he and others were getting more ambitious in terms of passing broader reform, right? And they put SAFE, I guess, in the back burner.
Well, that's a perfect description. They were ambitious,
yeah,
and they felt like they could get more, that they could legalize it generally across the nation, right, or expunge lots of the violations that had occurred both at the federal level and at the state level. So, things that I didn't disagree with, but I just knew was a step too far. Right. That they weren't going to get that. They wanted more, and the Republicans wanted less. And so, we found this sweet spot where Republicans were comfortable with the legislation and realized that there was a public safety issue in place. That, one of the things that really has spurred me on this is all the robberies and the burglaries and we've had murderers. Because there's so much cash generated. So Republicans and Democrats were concerned about that. Some Republicans, some Democrats said, hey, this, why are we getting involved in this? More of a libertarian kind of approach. If it's not hurting anybody, let's move on. And Democrats wanted to be able to help small businesses, particularly women-owned and minority-owned businesses that couldn't get a loan, that couldn't get any banking support, no credit cards, no checking accounts, no payroll accounts, and they just wanted to normalize, these businesses so that they could have normal banking relationships. So it was Democrats and Republicans, both. The Republicans didn't want so much, and the Democrats wanted more, that stalled it out from 19 through 22.
Right.
Now the Senate is moving things, and that's a step in the right direction. But as you said earlier, time is running out. We're in the campaign season now, and ultimately we're going to be at an election and then a lame duck.
Sure. So let's just, I mean, definitely want to stay on that point, but just stepping back for a minute. So if we go back to October, November, December 2022, it seems that that's when we came closest to passing SAFE, right? They were going to put it in the defense bill. Senator Schumer, which as we say initially, maybe was too ambitious. Maybe in later 2022, the tone changed. People became more willing to pass SAFE first, and it was going to pass as together. I don't know if it was appropriations bill. I think it was a defense bill, right? And we came very close. And I don't want to put words in your mouth here. Based on what you can share and what you think what happened? I mean, was it as simple as saying Senator McConnell got on the way?
Yes, it is that simple. So what happened is we'd added it, so we passed it in sort of the ordinary course of business, normal thing. Hearing, markup, goes to the Rules Committee, passes the floor, goes to the Senate. That's the ordinary course. That's the regular order. There is a different way to do it, which is, and we've done that, and it just run into a roadblock, both Republicans and Democrats, for whatever their reasons. Then what we did is we said, okay, we can attach it to a big bill, the one that must pass. We attached it to the CARES Act, and then we attached it to another act, and then we attached it to the National Defense Authorization Act. And what happens when you do that, and this is sort of advanced legislative procedure for your listeners and viewers, when you take something that isn't part of the original bill, it's part of a bigger bill, and it's got to be somewhat germane to it. But if you try to add it on, it takes what are called the four corners to say yes. You have to get yes from the four corners. The four corners are the Speaker of the House, the Minority Leader of the House, the Majority Leader of the Senate, and the Minority Leader of the Senate. And we had the Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. We had the Minority Leader at the time, Kevin McCarthy. We had the Minority Leader and the Majority Leader, who was Chuck Schumer, but we could never get Mitch McConnell. So the way you described it, it's as simple as we couldn't get that fourth person, and any one of these four has a veto, and we could never get it beyond McConnell. Right.
So then just moving on to, when we had that committee vote last year, 14-9, September 2023, in terms of what became safer, right? Now we're moving forward, right? We talked about December 22, then we get to September 2023. There are some changes to it, right? That it's called safer at that point. Passes committee 14-9. Why do you think Senator Schumer didn't bring it to a vote in the Senate floor that year in 2023?
I wish I could tell you I had, exact reason. I don't have an exact reason. I think he thought he could add it to something else. There was a lot of talk to add it to the Federal Aviation Authority bill, the FAA bill.
Yeah.
There was talk of adding it to the NDAA bill. And oftentimes it's easier just to do that. But again, you've got to have all four in agreement. And so even though you may have 60 votes in the Senate and you got a big majority in the House, all of a sudden you're giving one or two people a veto when you do it that way. So sometimes it's very slick and it happens just boom, just done. But other times, as we've experienced, you can run into a roadblock. So I don't know his reasoning. I think that this may be something that moves, right now, looks like the House is going to go out of session this week and returns like September 9th.
Yeah.
So is gone for the end of this month and all of August, both for campaigning and district work and
Right.
for a little bit of a vacation. Senate, same thing. So,
Yeah,
you
no,
know,
I
there
hear
isn't a
you.
lot of time right now.
No, I know, and we're getting here to the to what really the core of the matter, right? Which is what's happening right now. But my question to you, in terms of you know, and I'm not trying to do too much history here. After that committee vote September 2023, you're saying he tried to put it to other bigger bills, although that hadn't worked back in December 2022. So why try again in late 2023? But is it? I mean, in my opinion, again, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. Maybe he's not so confident that he can get the 60 votes in the Senate, and that's why he didn't try to pass it in the Senate floor in late 2023. Do you agree with that thesis or not necessarily?
I don't agree with it. I think
Okay.
he has 60 votes. And, you know, you've got all the Democrats and you've got 10 Republicans. And, you know, Steve Daines has been really, so Republican from Montana, has been the lead Republican and really been a driver. He's been really, for me, he was a great partner to work with on all this stuff. And so, you know, he's had between 10 or 15 votes for the last 4 years. And, you know, it's possible that somebody's dropped off and that he's now down below 60 votes, but I don't think so. I think there's just some stuff going on in the background, making sure that the language is just right.
Right.
Making sure that the financial piece of this thing, as well as the public safety and the cartel pieces are right.
Right.
But Pablo, I don't have a great answer for you on that.
Okay, no, understood. Look, and again, we want to get to a core subject, but now that you left Congress, who in your opinion has taken the mantle in the House and in the Senate around SAFE? Is it just, to me, it seemed that the heir apparent was David Joyce, right? Congressman Republican, but maybe there's more people there. Who are driving SAFE forward in your opinion right now? And it's called SAFER now, of course, yeah.
So the two Republicans are David Joyce and Warren Davidson, both of them from Ohio. And both of them were co-sponsors with me and helped me a lot when I was in Congress. On the Democratic side, it's Jim Himes and it's Troy Carter. So both of them and Troy has been really working hard on this, even though he's not on David is not on the Financial Services Committee, David Joyce, and Troy is not on the Financial Services Committee. Himes and Davidson are. So they're the ones moving it through that committee. The other two just are pushing it, and they're good advocates for the legislation. In the Senate, it's Merkley, who's the Democratic sponsor, but really the driver is Steve Daines, the Republican from Montana.
Right.
And, some others. Patty Murray was very strong, has been very strong on this subject. She's in a high leadership position in the Senate. I think she's chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee. So she's in a top position, but she's always been real supportive of this as well. So there are strong individuals. And Chuck Schumer, I mean, he really has taken a lot of steps to drive this bill. Right. And we need him to continue to be somebody who is just pushing this thing. Because, with each election, you don't know what you're going to get the next cycle.
Right. So look, I mean, we've touched on the latest version of SAFER, but you yourself are saying that maybe there's still some wording that needs to be adjusted on both sides if it's going to move forward. But what about the recent attempt by Representative Joyce of adding what they call SAFER Light to an appropriations bill that in the end did not succeed, right? But any thoughts on the wording of that SAFER Light bill? I think he broadened the definition of financial institutions. They used to be depository, and then he broadened it to financial. Any color you can give on that attempt?
Well, so I think you should have David on your show, for one thing, so get what's in his mind.
Yeah.
But he and I've stayed pretty close on this. I think, none of the appropriations bills are passing. Okay, that's part of it. So he didn't want to create something and to put on a bill that wasn't going to pass even the House. much less the Senate.
Right.
So I think, you'd really need to talk to him about his thinking, because he was comfortable he had the votes. And he did broaden the definition of financial services a little bit
Right.
in that. But he took away, which I think bothered some of his Republican colleagues, he took away a little bit of some of the enforcement stuff that was in SAFE or SAFER.
Right.
So I think, but you're gonna have to talk to David about that. I think he had the votes, but he was looking at a bill that wasn't gonna move in the House even. I think what we're seeing is House is probably going to adjourn either tonight or tomorrow for this recess period, because they don't have the votes to pass these appropriations bills, that there'll be what's called a continuing resolution come the end of September. Now, maybe that's a place where you stick it on the continuing resolution. That's a possibility.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Okay, so here we are. I guess what I'm hearing you saying, and again, without putting words in your mouth, right? Recess starts tomorrow or today. We don't get back until September. It's just before the election. Obviously, very divisive time. I mean, the simple headline would be impossible to get SAFE done this year, especially with Speaker Johnson's apparent attitudes towards SAFE. What would you say to that? And I know there's a lot to unpack there, but if it were to happen, how does it happen? If it happens this year.
So Pablo, the first thing I'd say is nothing's impossible. If you get the timing and the good Lord looks down on you and you get the right people together, can do about anything. So, and you've kind of, given me a little bit of razzing, say, Ed, you're always so positive about this. You're very optimistic, and I probably have been obviously overly optimistic.
You have to be. I mean, to push.
But it's something that needs to get done, and that's why I guess I feel so strongly about it. We should have done this 5 years ago, and it's still hanging fire. So we are in a complicated election season. I mean, a lot of things have been happening over the course of just the last 2.5, 3 weeks with, the debate, and then Trump being shot, and then Biden saying, I'm going to pass the torch. So there are a lot of things going on, but Johnson, I've not, he and I are friends, and we've been friends for several years. Now, he's a very conservative guy. His politics and mine are very different, but he's a friend of mine, and he's an honorable guy. And so if we can get it out of the Senate, I would really appeal to him that let the vote, let's see where the votes are. Let the House do what it does. If it doesn't have the votes, it doesn't have the votes. But you got to give it a chance. And that's what I would try to prevail on him about that.
Right. So, okay, just to stay on that point. So the first step, and I know these things are concurrent, but the first step you're saying, let's not talk about the House, get it out of the Senate, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, yes. Senator Schumer has it all on his plate, but you think there's a path for him to try to put it up for a vote on a standalone basis, not as part of a bigger bill? What will be September, October, I guess?
What Senator Schumer's running into is the clock now, which is what happened to us again in 22. The clock ran out.
Right.
Because he was trying to get it on the bigger bill. If he just brought it to the floor, it would have passed. So hopefully he doesn't let the clock run out this time. If he were to bring it to the floor of the Senate, he would have the votes to pass it.
Right. But when you're saying if, why doesn't he do it? If it's...
I don't know why he's not doing it. Unless there aren't 60 votes. But based on my count, they have 60 votes.
Right. And I'm sorry, you're saying on a standalone basis, right?
On a standalone basis. Then, if it's attached to something like the NDAA or the continuing resolution, then you've got to have all four
corners, right,
agree to it. And McConnell, based on history, it's going to be hard for him to do it.
Right.
Johnson, if we're going to get him to do it, we need to do it probably more in the regular court, unless there's some real give and take that's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And that could be.
Right.
You're certainly going to get, I think Hakima would be supportive and Schumer supportive.
Right.
There'd have to be a lot of horse trading. And one of the places where this horse trading is going on, and since it's financial services, has to do with crypto and with regulating cryptocurrencies and
Right.
fintechs and things like that. So there is a lot of discussion, Pablo, right now where
Right.
SAFER would be added to a financial services piece of legislation that has, that puts some regulatory frameworks
Right.
around crypto.
Right. But they tried that earlier this year and it didn't go through, right? Or is that still alive, still going through the
It's
motion?
still alive. It's still alive.
Okay. So before we move on, so the three scenarios: one, it gets passed in the Senate standalone, it gets attached to the NDA or some big spending bill, or three, it gets it's part of a script bill. In terms of those three scenarios, what do you think is more likely? I'm not asking you to give probabilities, but in terms of the three paths, which one would be more likely for it to happen?
Three.
With crypto.
Three.
Okay.
Three, because then you've got some things, then you got some
Sure.
horse trading you can
Right.
do.
Right. Okay. And I'm so understood. I mean, you answered the question. What I still don't understand is that if Senator Schumer has the 60 votes in the Senate, and then, why doesn't he put it up for a vote on a standalone basis? I know it's a question for him, not for you, but
if I see him, and I saw him, a month or so ago at an event, and he said, we're going to get this done. We're going to get it done. And so now I would, if I were to see him, or if you're to see him, and say, Senator, can we get this thing moving? Because you overcame the really big hurdle, which was the banking committee. So can we get it to the floor of the Senate and then worry about whether, Johnson or somebody else going to allow it to proceed, but get it to the House? Because the House, we passed it, half dozen times.
Right. And I'm sorry, so you're saying that and I know this is all hypothetical, right? But so if you think on a standalone basis, if it were to pass the Senate, you believe that Speaker Johnson wouldn't block it, that he would put it up for a vote?
I would go and implore him to do that. I don't know precisely because he's been pretty, in terms of his own politics and his own voting, not for it at all. But I think as a speaker, he's seen it pass a number of times. He's seen the number of Republican votes. And if we were to add something that was a little more, that was enticing to him, sort of the crypto regulatory piece, then, but that's what politics is all about. It's it's this trading.
Yeah.
So, that's a lot of hypotheticals. And, now, looking back on it, I wish to heck we'd have gotten this done in 22 when all the stars were in place to get it done.
Yeah.
But didn't happen.
Yeah. Look, I mean, on that point, I always thought there was an opportunity for horse trading around the Farm Bill, right? So Speaker McConnell supported the Farm Bill, and maybe there was a chance to do some horse trading there, but I don't know why they didn't do that.
So, with respect to hemp,
right?
The Senator McConnell felt he had a real burgeoning industry in Kentucky. Yeah. And he did, but they didn't, the way SAFE has been fine-tuned over the years with really a lot of give and take between Republicans and Democrats, between the White House and the Department of Justice and Treasury. I mean, everybody's had a say to try to really refine the language. That wasn't refined. And it came in late in the Farm Bill process. And there's been a lot of problems as a result of it. It's pretty just wide open. And in some respects, and I've supported the hemp part, and part of SAFE is trying to address some issues that were never resolved in the Farm Bill for hemp, whether it's credit cards, a lot of the financial services piece of this thing.
Right.
But we've also seen that it's very hard for regulators to understand how much THC is in, it's supposed to be limited to 3.2%. but it's really been hard to manage this. There's an effort to get the FDA to be in charge of it and do a number of different things, but it's been pretty wide open since the Farm Bill was passed. And I think McConnell, I'm trying to get into his mind. I think he has felt that when he added that to the Farm Bill, it hasn't worked out the way he expected it to. Let me put it that way.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, and that it's being delayed. It was supposed to be a 2023 Farm Bill, and now we're still waiting, I mean, until 2025 probably for one. Look, Congressman, you've been very generous with your time here. I want to keep you here a bit longer if you don't mind. Let's move the discussion now to a separate topic with nominee Kamala Harris. I don't know if you want to share any interaction or discussions or that you might have had with her over the years around safe banking. And then your general thoughts in terms of the latest news, right? In terms of President Biden not seeking re-election and nominee Harris, but just general views.
So I feel good if Vice President Harris becomes president. I think from a safe or safer banking or rescheduling kind of setting, we'll be in good shape because she was a sponsor of SAFE before she became vice president.
Right.
So, and obviously from California and, but she comes at it with a prosecutor's eye. So she doesn't just roll over on this. She's been law enforcement. She wants it done in a way that makes sense, that you don't have a law that you're not enforcing. Prosecutors don't like doing that. So she wants to get this thing, so that it's correct, so that it's right. And so I feel pretty comfortable were she to become, and I want her to become president, obviously. But, we also know that under Trump, at least, the Treasury Department kept the FinCEN guidance in place. So we didn't really run into a buzzsaw that could have happened under Trump. But for me, I know, that Vice President Harris was a sponsor of SAFE. And I think she comes at it, we've got stuff in there. The bill really is a good example of what can be done when both sides are working, trying to, express their concerns, and you're not just wedded to your idea, but you work together. That bill over time has become better and better. Right. And it has law enforcement piece of it. It has anti-cartel and national security components to it. It has financial services and public safety. So I think she will be a strong supporter of it as she was before. Right.
Look, here I want to ask you just some hypothetical questions, but, from a political point of view, and of course, always from the cannabis angle, are you concerned about a red wave in November and what that could mean for cannabis? If we don't get rescheduling done this year, the assumption it's unlikely that future, candidate Trump would continue the process. I mean, do you agree with that view? Any general thoughts you can share?
All right, Friday, I was worried about a red wave. Monday, the Republicans should be worried about a blue wave. The energy level for Democrats has gone from here to sky high. And this is it's going to be a battle between now and November 5th. I think we win the White House and we're going to win the House of Representatives.
Right.
Democrats are. And I I've been around this game a long time, Pablo. I retired after 16 years in Congress. I've been in our state Senate, for 8 years. I've been on, Colorado was a super red state. When I first got elected, it's a blue state now. Things move and change, right. But they've been changing at an unbelievable pace between the debate, the shooting, the decision by the president to pass the torch to the vice president.
Right.
This is going to be very interesting, but I think some Republicans are going to be very disappointed come November 6th.
So let's stay on that point, all right? So let's assume there's a blue wave, right? And that's
Okay.
the real expectation from the people driving all this. So maybe there would be less of an onus or pressure on the executive branch, President Biden right now, to finish rescheduling this year, or even to get safe banking done this year, because the focus right now is just to win the election, regain the House, and then get these things done in 2025. Do you agree that, I mean, I'm not saying it's a risk, but maybe, I mean, they have to prioritize things, right? And getting elected would be the first priority.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just, and it's going to be a very fast 100 days. I mean, this is we haven't seen this very often in history where you make a switch at this point.
Sure.
And so Vice President Harris and whoever she chooses as her running mate, I mean, they are going to be just going like bats out of hell. I mean, they just have to go, 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 go.
Right.
And I think so. First order of business is for them to get elected. Cannabis will play a role in that. I mean, it's what are we at? 47, 48 states that have some level of medical, cannabis use, whether it's medical or CBD or whatever it might be. Right. So it's an issue for voters, and I think it's a good one for Democrats.
Right.
So they're going to run on that. I think at the same time, the president has started the rescheduling ball in motion. It's rolling. What you have to do under the Administrative Procedures Act, you've got to go through some specific steps that take time, that have certain deadlines, but certain time periods for comment and discussion. That is in motion, and it will stay in motion. It will, it's going, and but that one just takes amount of time.
Right. On that point, and here I know we're getting off subject, and first of all, we have to see what the president is going to say tonight at 8 p.m., right, in terms of what he wants to accomplish before Inauguration Day. What are the priorities? Do you expect him, and again, I'm putting on the spot here, do you expect him to say anything about cannabis? I
don't know. That's a very good question, because he has spoken about it, in his different addresses from time to time. He might, because it is definitely unfinished business for his administration, and it's something he was willing to do that nobody before him was willing to do, which is since Richard Nixon. So he might very well bring it up. I don't know. I think tonight's going to be a pretty emotional night for him. The guy's worked hard, and we all, none of us want to see somebody who just isn't as spry as they used to be. None of us want to see it in ourselves. We don't want to see it in anybody else. But that's the fact that that's life. But I think it'll be an emotional evening, Pablo.
I see. No, I understood. Of course. And he started the process in October 2022. It's been very deliberate. They've been going step by step. Everyone says, dotting the I's, crossing the T's. The question now is whether we're going to get, we're very familiar with the steps of the administrative process, right? The question now, the public comment period is finished. DEA has to respond to some of what are called significant comments. Let's see how long they take. Then they have to decide whether they're going to have ALJ hearings, how long they would take. Are they going to be able to, the DEA, DOJ, are they going to be able to publish the final rule, in the Federal Register, 30 days, in time before Inauguration Day, right? So there's all those question marks. But what I'm worried about is that in their platform recent, I think a couple of days ago, they said something like, in terms of things that have been accomplished around cannabis, they said we reclassified cannabis, right? But they haven't. The process hasn't been finished yet. So that's...
Well, from the White House's point of view and the HHS, which is, they're saying this is what we want, and then the Administrative Procedures Act kicks in.
Right.
Okay, so they've done what they can do. Now you got to follow this process.
Right.
To reschedule. So it's a process. It's a long process. Now, if Congress wanted to just change the statute, Congress could.
Yeah.
But that's not been where Congress has been headed. And to a degree, I understand where Cory Booker's coming from or Chuck Schumer were coming from a couple of years ago. They wanted to do more.
Right.
And you can do more by statute, and you can do it sometimes quicker, or as we've seen, this is, changing the controlled substance statute just with safe banking has been a 9-year process already. So I don't know.
Yeah. Look, just again, putting on the spot here in terms of hypothetical scenario. Let's say Trump wins the White House. There's this talk around. You talked about a FinCEN, right? There's this talk that back in the day when Jeff Sessions rescinded the Cole memo, that he was actually against that he would have preferred to leave it in place. I mean, do you think there's validity to that, or is that just a rumor that's unfounded, to your knowledge?
I don't know, but we do know that he left the FinCEN guidance in place, which tells you a lot that people were able to still conduct business. If the president, I think, had wanted, the Sessions took the Cole memo away, the president going to said to Secretary Mnuchin, let's get rid of the FinCEN guidance, and he didn't. So, I think that's a pretty good indication.
Right. So look, again, putting on the spot, the White House and the HHS have done what they can, right? Now they have to let the process work its way through. OLC gave deference to DOJ in terms of some of over the DEA in that process. The question is now whether it gets done in time, right, on time, but also whether there's the assumption was that if it was going to be done and completed and implemented, that we would get a new Cole memo too, right, or a Garland memo, right? And I'm just wondering if they even have the time to even do that, or the focus, given everything else going on.
I mean, the clock is ticking, no question about it. And it gets harder and harder. And then certain things, the Congressional Review Act, CRA, kicks in at some point. And, so there are a number of things that can still happen, good and bad. But the thing is in motion. It takes, you can't shrink the time. Once it's in motion, they got to provide all these statutorily based time periods for comment and for hearings and for all sorts of stuff. So it's ticking, but at least it's ticking. Something's happening that hadn't happened in 53 years.
Yeah. No. Look, I'm going to take some questions here from online. I'll read them to you, just short answers. Someone asking, why don't we try a constitutional amendment to legalize cannabis? I mean, but it sounds simple, but it's a long process, right? What do you think is the probability of that happening, of that approach?
It's a good idea, except it's going to take as long as anything else, because you got to get 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate, and then I think 3/4 of the states to ratify it. So I'll give you an example. The 27th Amendment was an amendment that was part of the Bill of Rights that didn't pass right away. James Madison wrote it. It finally got ratified with the 38th state in 1992 when Michigan ratified it. So it could take 200 years.
Right. We have to be patient. Another question, someone asking about Vice President Harris. Could she double down on cannabis during the next, 100 days in terms of, saying, if I'm elected, I'm going to legalize cannabis, or I'm going to deschedule cannabis or decriminalize cannabis, or maybe just status quo, say, look, we started the rescheduling process, it's going through, and that's as good as it gets for the time being. What do you think she says?
If I were Vice President Harris, I would say, I want to finish the rescheduling that we started. That's a good step. And I want to see safe banking or safer banking passed, because I was the sponsor of that.
Right.
Let's get those two pieces done, and then we can worry about the rest.
Right. I hear that she's speaking at a crypto conference next week, or in a week or 2 weeks, that she's been consulting with Mark Cuban around crypto. So it seems that the conversions of crypto and safe could happen the way you're talking about it. But
very possible. And I know the conversations, particularly in the Senate, are still underway about crypto and cannabis, and we in the House, McHenry, that Chairman McHenry from North Carolina, he chairs financial services, he wants to get crypto legislation passed, and he's got his own version of it, but he is definitely, he was never a supporter of SAFE, but he was never one of these guys that said, over my dead body. He was always a good guy for me to work with in moving this thing forward. He never voted for SAFE, but he wasn't a big obstacle to it. And I think if he can get a crypto that he likes, he will be supportive of putting that together with SAFE and moving forward.
Right. Someone's asking, that you talked about you hope or you believe in a blue wave in November, but you talked about gaining the White House and the House, and you're also assuming that Democrats keep the Senate or that Republicans keep the Senate. I mean, the Democrats don't have the Senate right now, but yeah, go on.
I think we have a blue wave.
They have the majority. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I think we have a blue wave, and I think we hold the Senate. Now, I think your question was, well, what do you see? And I say the White House and the House.
Right.
The Senate is really, it's tough right now, but honestly, the way things have changed over the last few days, I think we hold the Senate too. That's always been kind of the hard one right now, but I think we win. I think Rubin wins in Arizona. I think Jackie Rosen holds Nevada. I think Tester wins in Montana.
Right.
I think Casey wins in Pennsylvania. All of these are going to be very tough races.
Right.
And Sherrod Brown, somehow he holds, and people like him because he's kind of an outlier in Ohio. So if we win those 5 seats, and it's not easy, but I'd say chances are we hold the Senate.
Right. Someone asking me of a potential vice presidential nominees, right? That people have talked about Mark Kelly, Governor Shapiro. Any quick thoughts in terms of how close they are to safe banking?
Mark Kelly is supportive. I don't know about Shapiro. Tim Walz has been in the conversation, so he's the governor of Minnesota. He would be supportive.
Right.
Let's see, who else is in the mix? Pritzker from Illinois, that's his name's come up. Polis from Colorado, he's obviously been a big supporter from day one. But I think in terms of those vice presidential folks.
And the Bashirs,
And Bashir, so I don't know really Bashir or Shapiro. I assume that they're both supportive. Shapiro is, Pennsylvania, there's been this real effort over the course of the last year to legalize. And I think that that's what's sort of pending before their legislature right now. And I think Shapiro's supportive of that. So he would be supportive of rescheduling and of SAFE, I would imagine.
Right. Last question from the ones coming online. The usual probability question. Of the 3 options I gave you, 3 paths for SAFE, you said the most likely of the 3, without giving probability, was, to putting it together in a bill with crypto. Probability that happens, if you want to answer, but we'll have probability.
The probability of number 3 happening by the end of this year, I'd say 55%.
Wow. All right.
But you also have to take it with a grain of salt because you're talking to the eternal optimist here. All right. but I'm optimistic. The pieces are there. The need for normalizing banking and financial services, whether it's insurance or housing or, all sorts of things, and just checking accounts is there, and people understand that.
Right.
And, the politics have gotten in the way, but I think I think we got a decent shot. And with the movement that was made in the Senate by the banking committee passing SAFE or SAFER, that gives us a start.
Look, I'm going to add one more question. That there were attempts in the past to add language to safe banking that would give safe harbor to the U.S. exchanges to list, plant-touching companies in the exchanges. Was that a bit of a deal breaker? Did that create problems?
I don't think it's a deal breaker, and it's been part of the conversation.
Right.
I think what is more likely is that, you've got SAFE or SAFER, and both of them have passed the House. SAFE has passed the House. SAFER finally got past the banking committee. You don't want to rock the boat too much.
Right.
I don't think that there's a lot of opposition to it.
Yeah.
But I think that it's just like, oh, geez, we got this. Let's not screw it up. And that's more the issue, not that there's, major opposition. It's more,
Right.
wow, let's take what we got and keep moving. But it's, we tried to deal with it, Pablo. You and I talked about it by expanding the definition of financial services and to go back to the National Banking Act of 1863 or whatever it was,
Right. Yeah.
passed by Abraham Lincoln, which is the broadest definition of financial services, because over time we paired that back with Glass-Steagall particularly. We expanded it again a little bit under Dodd-Frank, but the biggest, broadest definition of financial services is under the National Banking Act of 1863.
Right. Look, I'm going to add one more question that came through, and I think we talked about this before, but what did SAFE really say about credit cards?
Oh, it's a whole section on credit cards.
Right. And it approves.
Absolutely.
It allows.
I mean,
it allows.
Oh, absolutely. At there. So that was, and it really focuses both on, cannabis, but also hemp. And that was something we thought would be attractive to Mitch McConnell, because of the hemp piece of this thing. But there's a big section that we worked with the credit card companies, with the regulators on credit cards. Yes. Right.
No, that's great. Look, I think that we're out of time here. I'll let you make some closing remarks, but I just want to, personally, I just want to, I take the opportunity here to thank you for all your work, right? Your service, all you've done for the industry, the efforts, and the optimism, which is a good thing in continuing to push safe banking, and the work that you do for the industry. I mean, now from outside Congress. So thank you. And I cannot speak for everyone, but I'm sure everyone in the industry would agree with me. All right.
Well, you're just very kind to let me come on your show and participate in this. And the way you talked about that meeting we had at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning brought back memories. So thank you very much.
Yeah, for an analyst, that's as good as it gets, But anyway, all right. Thank you very much. Have a good day, Congressman. And everyone, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Bye.